I've returned here for a quick follow-up on my last video where I went over some basic security principles that I'm trying to abide by, having built kind of a home server that I could use to authenticate into my home network via VPN. So, I was kind of thinking to myself after I released the video, maybe some of my security approaches are a little overkill. I mean, disabling password authentication is kind of a no-brainer nowadays because things like that can be brute forced, especially if you don't have any sort of timeout system in place, which, really depends on a lot of things on your end. Whether you do or don't have good measures to keep brute forces from occurring. But right now, let us head into my server and show you that my security measures were actually not in vain, and that my server and probably any clients out there, any end users, are under kind of a constant random brute force attempted hacking from all over the globe, right? Because this is just kind of the state of the internet and public IPs. Excuse me there. So I have a couple location for logs. However, since we're running Debian, we can show you kind of the master SSH log. And so this is kind of the equivalent of the old school auth.log, which used to exist in the variable directory, or var. So I'm just going to show you here that we can write the contents of our master auth log to pretty much anywhere we want, or we could read it outright, but let's write it here to our home directory. You'll see that we do indeed have a new log file. We can look into it and kind of get a glimpse at all the traffic coming in and out of my server. And so some of this stuff is noise, some of this is me, and some of these are attempted attacks. Now we're not going to go through this unfiltered version, especially because I have not filtered out my own IP, hostname, etc. out of there. But instead, we're going to take a look at some logs that I pulled yesterday, show you these constant attacks that are occurring on my device and probably your device as well. And then we're going to kind of use that to justify these somewhat tedious but basic security measures that I've taken. So we can actually filter through that master log that we just created using Python scripting pretty quickly. So let's take a look at invaliduser.py. See that this is essentially just singling out lines from that log. In this case, the last file I read was in my logs directory, my user logs directory, which I created. That's not a directory, doesn't come with your operating system, like the var log directory for Linux. And I was reading a different file, but essentially I just want to return any lines in my auth.log which contains the string invalid user, because that'll tell me that someone has actually made an attempt to authenticate into the system with a username, meaning this is not just like white noise IP pinging, etc. These are kind of attempts at hacking your system, probably through some sort of brute force, where not only are they brute forcing the private key to get in, but they're also brute forcing the username, because you don't publicly broadcast your usernames. And I'll show you why you shouldn't be using generic names. So let's take a look at something I created yesterday where this is already filtered, and I've removed my own IP here. So I believe invalid -users.markdown. So let's bring this font down. So you can see here that this log, just like the log we just created before, starts on October 31st, which must have been when I set this up. And you can see that some of this traffic, most of this is from me, but you can see that starting all the way in November 1st, you can start to see people trying to get into my system. So in some of these cases, I've hidden my username because it's other profiles that don't want to broadcast to my YouTube channel. You see this IP, someone trying to authenticate with the name. I suppose it's an abbreviation of Ubuntu. This is a blank username. These are some IP trying to authenticate in with the username test. I know these are not for me. As you could scroll down, you see that this file is pretty big. But then this is, here are some good examples as to why you shouldn't be using generic usernames. You'll see here some people trying to authenticate in with the username admin. Now, if I had an account on this device named admin, they would get to the next stage in trying to authenticate in, which is to provide a private key. Now, they're really not going to be able to brute force any of the private keys I have set up, but it doesn't matter because I don't have any user profiles named admin anyways. You'll see here a different IP than above. Here we have 141.98.11.11, and 2 hours later, we have someone else attacking me on trying to get into, again, a non-existent profile, but this one is named telecom admin. So again, I don't have any profiles named telecom admin. Maybe you shouldn't have any profiles named telecom admin. Businesses in general shouldn't, because clearly this is part of kind of the automated attack space. A lot of admins, some username, some default, which username is a common credential that is given to like old school routers and gateways and whatnot. So again, change your username from something generic. Then as you go down, you see a different type of attack occurring on November 7th here. These, again, from different IPs, trying to get in with usernames like FTP, which, again, I don't even allow for the FTP protocol, so good luck getting in. Then more enterprise-oriented attacks like Oracle. Then we have names like Delphine, Lucas B, CS Strike, Sabrina, which these are all possible like home device usernames. If you have a name such as Sabrina, don't name your user profile Sabrina. Here's a good reason why, because random attacks will attempt this username at random, and you don't want your device to get kind of picked up on that. Go down some more, you see other random names and also some realistic names. See here, Zhang, Melinda. And, yeah, so this is pretty interesting traffic here. This entry, I edited out because this is actually my own first name. I don't think this attacker knew that it was my first name, but like I said, if your name is Sabrina, don't name your user profile Sabrina, because one of these random attacks might try that username, right? And it's possible that with whatever script is built that runs these botnets, they might know when they fished a username that is correct. It might store that for later, and then they'll go back and try to brute force into the system using a bunch of different passwords. But you'll see here, this user also tried other realistic names like Jerry, which same IP, actually not the same IP as the one that shows my real name, so maybe that is concerning. But yeah, maybe maybe blacklist this IP. I mean, there are a lot of abusive IPs out there. Well, you'll see this one in particular, though, was pretty aggressive on November 8th. This 95.156.96.46. lot of attacks in a row from this same IP, right? All different ports, all different invalid usernames, many of which are generic, like Sign, Jerry, like I pointed out before, Norris, Zara. In fact, this whole row, all of these are from this same abusive IP, and you can actually see that this attack was going on for like 30 minutes, right? And at some point, when they hit this 10-minute timeout, this is because their IP was banned for 10 minutes, and since I've found this, I've actually increased the ban duration, right, so that they don't come back 10 minutes later and continue trying to get into the system. So this is just a good demonstration of why you should have many, many layers of security, starting with the most basic point of entry, which is the username, right? Don't have a simple username. Don't have it just be your first name. And especially don't let it be something that is guessable. Linux is a little nifty in that it is case sensitive for most things, or everything. So you have a little leeway when you're specifying your name as a username, but still, mine is a combination of letters and numbers. This is a pretty uncreative attack here, bot2. I don't have any usernames named bot2 on here, so let me see, Ubuntu. Oh, I think I'm good to close out of here, but we could also take a look at my actual fail to ban logs, which this is where certain bans will have come through. So I filtered out actions in this one, and so this just shows bans and unbans. And you'll see here, originally my ban time was set to 600, I think, seconds, so that's 10 minutes. Later on, I increased this to like 100 or 200 minutes. And then once I've fully fleshed out my authentication to know that I'm not accidentally going to be locking myself out of my system, I'm going to increase it even further. And then any abusive IPs that try to authenticate it multiple times, they're going to get instantly kicked out. So I think I am probably good to leave you there. I think that alone was enough justification that that security is not in vain. And if you actually filter out the types of abusive random attacks launched on your system from abusive IPs, rather, you'll see that it's actually kind of ridiculous and much more frequent than I think you may expect if you're not really versed at all with any sort of computer technology. Real quick here, though, I'm just gonna look up, or I'll show you two IPs I wrote down before just as an example. Yeah, so definitely don't try to connect to them like I just did. But if you throw out, a quick Google search, you'll see that any of these IPs are already well reported as being abusive. And so this one, for example, which was throwing out Chinese type names, I can't remember if this entry they were trying to get in with Zhang or what exactly it was, but then you look this up and sure enough, it is allegedly an IP associated with China, run by Tencent. I'm sure Tencent is just the entity that owns whatever data center, because Tencent is disgustingly huge. Let's look up this next IP, and this user was attempting, or this attacker, which again, this is probably not a person sitting behind the computer. In fact, it almost definitely isn't a person sitting behind the computer. This is all automated. This IP is associated with, let's actually take a look, 'cause I don't remember. Yep, Singapore. Okay, so real quick, while these aren't the same IP I was looking up, this is the file. This is actually searched by failed authentications rather than invalid user, right? So that was my mistake, is that root actually is a valid user, because I do have a root account on here because it's a Linux machine, but you can see these are the failed attempts for the root account, which again, you should be totally disabling password authentication for root altogether, because that's the one account that a random network knows definitely exists. So it should have 0 point of entries instead of just 1. If you need to get into the root account, you should elevate privileges from a different user profile like I do from sub 285. And you'll see here is more telecom admin. So I'm going to leave it there. Stay safe. Let me know if you enjoy, I guess, the sounds associated with this type of comment. I know this was less typing and maybe a little unnerving. Okay, take care.